What's up, everyone? This is Pete with another take, and today we are going to be speaking about the devastations of Osorio, which took place between 1605 through 1606. This was a period of time on the island of Hispaniola, which was then from 1492 through 1606. The period that we are referencing in this video was still a Spanish colony. There were no French present on the island, and the people of African descent that would be imported into the Western Third by the French in the beginning of the 18th century were not yet present on the island. So the Spanish during this period, they had a problem with the Spanish colonists and the people in the Spanish colony of Santo Domingo, which they were trading contraband with the English, the British, and the Dutch. And during this period, the Spanish also had issues with Holland and also England for 60 years. So with these depopulation events on the island of Hispaniola, the Spanish attempted to take measures to correct this problem. One of it being the colony being impoverished, and other parts that we would cite directly from Frank Mota Pons' book, The Dominican Republic, A National History, as well as we're going to read through briefly what Wikipedia says. So according to Wikipedia, the devastations of Osorio refer to a period in Santo Domingo in the early 17th century. In order to eliminate contraband trade in the north and northwest parts of the island, the Spanish monarch Philip III sent an order. The devastations of Osorio were a period on the colony of Santo Domingo in the early 17th century. In order to eliminate contraband trade in the north and northwest parts of the island, the Spanish monarch Philip III sent an order to the governor at the time of Hispaniola, Osorio de Osorio, to depopulate parts of the island by force if necessary, and to relocate the inhabitants of the vicinity of Santo Domingo in the southeast of the island. Contraband trade was also associated with an ideological problem that affected the roots of Spanish power and sovereignty over the colony. Contraband began to be viewed as more than just a violation of Spanish trade. It meant the penetration of religious ideals and political loyalties alien to the Spanish crown and people. By 1588, the authorities referred to the foreign smugglers as heretics. In 1594, the Archbishop of Santo Domingo warned the king that if a remedy was not found, the island would soon be lost to Protestants. The Archbishop denounced the growing tendencies of the inhabitants of the north and west of Hispaniola to establish ties and obligations with Protestant sailors and merchants. For him, the most alarming fact was that many of the colonists were starting to baptize their children in Protestant rites and were choosing foreign godparents. The situation was fully described in 1598 by Baltazar Lopez de Castro, a local bureaucrat who wrote to the crown warning of the need to take measures to avoid the continuation of these practices. He stated that the only way to deal with the problem was to move all the residents and their cattle from the island's northern and western regions to the surrounding areas of Santo Domingo. According to him, this measure would prevent the foreigners from illegally trading with the colonists and would also provide Santo Domingo with an abundance of livestock and dairy products. royal revenues would increase since the hides would be exported directly through the harbor of Santo Domingo. The church would enjoy the additional advantage of increased riches. So, no other solutions were at hand. The Consejo recommended to the Spanish king that the towns of Puerto Plata, Bayajá, and in the north, La Yaguana in the west, be depopulated. Once again, so an order went to depopulate the towns of Puerto Plata, Bayajá, which was in the north, and La Yaguana in the west. In August 1604, Lopez de Castro's returned to Santo Domingo from Seville, ordering the governor, Antonio de Osorio, to proceed with the depopulation of the smuggling centers. With the population being drawn into Santo Domingo, the smugglers and heretics would be deprived of their prey. The majority of the population adamantly protested this process. In Santo Domingo, an anonymous letter circulated against the authorities responsible for the proposed depopulation. The protests were prepared by people of Santo Domingo and La Yaguana. According to these, the depopulation should be postponed at least temporarily for a variety of reasons. They argued that it would be impossible to remove all the cattle since many were wild. Furthermore, the available labor force was insufficient to move the domestic herds. The inhabitants of those regions included many small proprietors who would be ruined by the move. They feared that runaway slaves would incite their slaves to escape, eventually allowing the cimarrones to control the contraband business. The protests were completely ineffective. In the middle of February 1605, Governor Osorio went to the north to carry out his orders. A general pardon was proclaimed for all those that had been involved in the smuggling. Once Osorio arrived at the designated towns, he ordered the people to gather their personal belongings, livestock, and to manage the disintegrated areas near Santo Domingo where they would construct new settlements. As expected, there was a great resistance from the inhabitants who were forced to leave their homes all within a short notice. The governor then burned the houses, ranches, churches, and crops to prevent the residents from remaining in those sites. Osorio was assisted by 150 soldiers from the garrison of Puerto Rico who had been dispatched for this purpose, and as a result, Puerto Plata, Montecristi, Yaguana, and Bayajá were all depopulated. In Bayajá, the residents rose up in arms against Osorio. This was true popular rebellion of common people who saw in the depopulation the beginning of their ruin, although more than 70 persons were hanged for having dealt with the enemies after the new law. The rebel leaders were never captured. So in closing, the depopulation events between 1605 through 1606 created a lot of problems for the colony of Santo Domingo. It left the colony impoverished. Slavery had ceased by 1630, and during this period, we also see that Spain had abandoned the colony, as mentioned many times by Alfredo de Vargas, for 3 centuries. This also gave way for the French to settle in the Western Third, which then would be officially ceded to the French with the Treaty of Weiswick in 1697. So that's all for today. Like, comment, and share. Don't be reactionary. Put some thought into it. And until next time.